Okay, in this video I just wanted to run through some of the kind of new specs and bits for the upcoming release in a couple of days. And I kind of mentioned in the last video that we've already got like an official date, so we know something's coming from Lumix, but obviously we don't quite know what, but there's been a lot of rumors and stuff. I just kind of wanted to go through them, give my thoughts, and just kind of discuss what's there and what I think could be true and what's not, and all the rest of it. So it looks like the S1R2 is what we're getting. We've seen all kinds of things. Like, I don't know what kind of bits you've kind of seen out there, but I've seen in one video it was actually like a DJI, the Ronin Mini 4. They've basically, somebody was using it on the gimbal, and then they kind of released the video. I don't know if it was supposed to be like a bit of a teaser, or they just didn't quite realise that they'd got it in the video, but they sort of took the video down once people had realised, and then re-uploaded it and kind of blurred out the camera. So like, we've seen what it looks like, or there's images everywhere that are available, and there are specs in there that people have kind of already talked about that clearly are testing the camera or have tested the camera. So things like the 8.1K open gate, people have openly talked about that, kind of saying that it has that. So we kind of really know it's this camera. We know it's got 8.1K open gate. So, obviously it's capable of 8K recording. So there's no kind of like mystery around that. It's kind of, it's out in the open, it's being talked about. And a lot of the other specs around it, probably are going to be pretty much right, you would have thought. But there's been some interesting things that have sort of come out over the last couple of days. So we've already kind of seen it sort of like around a 44 megapixel sensor. We know it's got that high resolution shot mode. But interestingly, we've got in there, so Apple ProRes is one of the new things that's kind of been introduced into the cameras since we sort of first had it with the GH6, and it's been introduced to a couple of cameras since then. G9 Mark II got it, GH7. So, and the S5 as well, to an extent, has ProRes as well. And then the GH7, with that, we got ProRes RAW for the first time internally. You've already been able to do it like through an Atomos Ninja V or Ultra, or V Plus or 5, whatever you want to call it. Basically the Ninja recorder. But the GH7 gave it to us internally. So it looks like this also is going to have internal ProRes RAW. I've seen a couple of things on like what resolutions it will do it to, but it's essentially not going to be everything, because you don't get everything in the GH7. It doesn't do open gate RAW internally, that type of thing. It's only specific kind of sizes. So that's sort of probably one for the official spec sheet to kind of see all those bits. But that's really interesting that it has got ProRes RAW like internal. That's really good. 8K sensor with ProRes RAW to some extent. And then you've kind of got all these other bits in there, like the dynamic range, seems reasonable. Those kind of numbers. So a lot of this is kind of probably a given for most of it. I mean, it's going to have the new like a move on from DFD, which we know because they've all got like this new kind of phased hybrid AF. I mean, it still utilizes DFD in very high frame rate modes, but for the most part it's using phase detect autofocus, and it just kind of falls back in those times when it can't use the phase detect. So we've got that new phase hybrid in there, which is good. Dual native ISO, auto, low and high, so a few different settings for dual native. I mean, that's interesting though that it is dual native, that's good. And then we've got like little bits in there like this Cinelike A2. I mean, I'm never really that interested in the new picture profiles they release. They're just they are what they are. I've never really been that bothered about them like they're like a monochrome and stuff like that. It's just like, I'm sure some people will be excited about it, but it's just, it is what it is. It's not that exciting to me. All Intra, this is interesting. I mean, this is one of those things where I feel like there's got to be some stuff missing from this, because it shoots all Intra up to essentially C4K or 4K. 3.3K is nice. Like I kind of wish we had that in the GH series cameras, the newer ones. That would be nice. But I mean, you must be able to shoot all intra above 4K. That would be pretty poor if you can't. Like, just have long op above 4K. That seems not great. I mean, especially when you've got SSD support on there. I mean, it stands to be seen, but for me that would be quite disappointing if all intra doesn't go above 4K. But you know, again, that sort of stands to be seen. You've got ProRes, it says here, up to 5.8K. It says that it's shipping out in March. Seems reasonable since it's sort of coming around in February. And then there's this additional bit about Lumix Flow. And I mean, one thing, I really like Lumix as an ecosystem. I do think it's really good. But one thing I do think they're very bad at is all the kind of apps and all the websites and everything that sits around the cameras are just so bad. They're all just a bit kind of archaic and messy and really hard to use. And I mean, they've only just released the Lumix Lab app. I mean, not that long ago, like last year. And that sits on top of what's already there. So you've got the image app, if you're using like GH5, cameras around that era, G9, those types of cameras. Then you've got the Lumix Sync app. So if you're using like the GH6, a few cameras that sort of sit around that era, that like they use the Sync app. You can use the Sync app with some of the other Lumix cameras. Then they brought in Lumix Lab, which looks to replace Lumix Sync. And then now they've also got this, like Lumix Flow. It's just like, I just don't understand why you need this many things. Like, it doesn't need to be more convoluted. It's like you could just build this into an existing app and just make the app better. But you know, it's like designed for videographers. You can use the iPhone as an external monitor. One of the things on here, actually, it says it's just for iOS, which I find a bit surprising because, you know, if it's a Lumix app, usually they come with like really good wide support for iOS and Android. And that is one thing, you know, credit to them. They have always done that. The support across devices is generally very good. Whereas, you know, a lot of companies out there just cannot be bothered. Like DJI, app support for Android, awful, like just really bad. So, you know, the fact that they actually do a lot of app testing for Android is like credit to them. But I sort of find that a little bit out of left field if it's just an iPhone release. Like, that seems a bit strange, just iOS app, no Android app. I mean, unless it's coming later down the line, but in that case, like, why rush it? It doesn't really seem like it even suits his camera anyway. Like, who's going to be editing on an app if they're shooting 8K footage? Like, literally no one. So I don't really see the point in that. Again, if you've got like a $3,500 camera, I can't see you doing storyboarding on an app. That just is like, probably not. You know, LUT creation and direct import to camera. Again, Lumix Lab does that. So like, that's really not needed. A filming assistant in a smartphone, essentially, again, that's what Lumix Sync and Lumix Lab do. Like, you know, you've got recording buttons, intervalometer type stuff for like photography. You've got, you know, all your settings and stuff are in there. You've got a live view. It just kind of seems to like overlap in so many ways. And like, again, a lot of these things don't even seem to sit alongside this. It's more of like, this was kind of like a type of stuff that, you know, maybe the S5 or something like that, because it's sort of like the entry level, like full frame, where somebody might kind of do some of this. But even then, it's such a big camera, like you're probably not going to be editing and stuff on an app. So, you know, I don't know. It's kind of, it's not really one of those things that interests me that much anyway. So you can probably tell that. But yeah, it just seems a bit strange, that one. And then again, you've kind of got like, this is supposedly all the, you know, the spiel from like the Panasonic website that's come out. Again, you know, you can kind of take it with a pinch of salt, but it's just like, it's there anyway. So 44 megapixel sensor, 14 stops dynamic range. You've got a native ISO range there. It says it goes from 80 to 51,200. And ISO extension, which is pretty standard across like the Lumix cameras. We've got the phase hybrid autofocus, which again, you know, we kind of assume that's coming. Like every camera now, really, unless it's like a refresh, like the kind of EU plug refreshes, or sorry, like the EU port refreshes to USB-C, they're pretty much, you know, new cameras should always be coming with PDAF now. That's kind of like the, you know, it's going to be the norm now for Lumix cameras, and it almost seems like they really have just tried to sort of sweep away a lot of the old cameras and just not really, they don't really get a lot of love anymore. So I think the everything now is going to be phase detect, not phase detect, not DFD. So they're kind of just running forward with that. And then you've got functions such as white balance ISO, isn't it? That's the same on pretty much all the Lumix cameras, you know, 3 buttons at the top is what we're used to. This like camera body isn't like a massive departure from anything. And then you've got the sort of stabilization. Again, looks pretty good. Like the S5 was, the S5 Mark II is a huge step up, like in terms of image stabilization. I'll be really interested to see, you know, this, it looks like another kind of step up again, which is really good. High res images, we talked about this in the other video, but I really like this feature on the GH line cameras. You can get some really great pictures out of it. It's got the option for like a tripod option and a handheld option. They're both really good to work with. I've actually got a video coming out soon about that, so I'll kind of link to that when that's out. But it's you've got other things in there like Open Gate. Again, this has sort of been around since the days of like the GH5 really, so it has been around for a while. And then the GH6, the GH7, G9 Mark II, the S9, S5 Mark II, they all kind of do the same. So this is like no different. You've got like the 3x2 sensor. You're going to get a whole sensor readout, which we're being told is 8.1K. And like I said, I think that's 100% now, because like I say, people that have the camera, it's almost like Lumix have allowed them to just sort of drop a few little nuggets of information around that, you know, that's okay. And then you've got things like, that's just saying about crop. I thought I was saying about the frame markers, which will be in it because they've only just been introduced in January's firmware, so last month. They'll be in this camera because it's a new feature. It's a good feature. Any camera that has Open Gate should have that, really. It'd be nice if they ported that back to some of the older cameras like the GH6. Even the GH5 would benefit from that. That would make that an even better camera to this day, like for very little money. And then we've got things like just sort of like weatherproofing and stuff like that. It sounds like it's going to be kind of fully weatherproof, which you'd assume from like a premium kind of Lumix cameras. They are really good. They're good, like robust cameras, like pretty hardy cameras. And then you've got in here, it's going to be the first Lumix system camera to support Capture One tethering. And that's something a lot of people have kind of, you know, Capture One support has been something that a lot of people have wanted, you know, improved for a long time. So that's good that they're working with Capture One, or Capture One are working with Lumix, and they're kind of making this stuff happen. So, you know, that hopefully they'll be making steps in other cameras as well to kind of improve those types of things. So that's really good. And you've got also Adobe Camera to Cloud, and again, that's another thing that can be potentially sort of ported across to other cameras, which is really good. You've already got things like on some of the other cameras, you've got like the Frame.io integration in there, and you know, this is just coming for other things, slightly different use cases, but you know, there's other things there. And then you've got on there 2 apps are available for enhanced user experience: Lumix Lab, which, you know, it's saying it's about like the lookup tables, and you know, it actually does quite a lot of things. It's got like all new kind of you know, monitoring and editing type features in there, all camera control features. And then the Flow app supports like video productions from planning, editing, and sorting of recordings. Again, I mean, it stands to be seen. It could be great, who knows? But I feel like that's just another gimmick they're kind of pushing out. But we'll kind of see how that goes. And again, like the you've got like the recommended retail price there, and it's kind of about 3.5 kind of grand in euros, and then with the kit lens 4.5. So it's I mean, that's actually quite a good lens to come with it, the 24 to 105 f4. So that's a decent zoom lens as well. So you've got that. And then sort of down here, this is one of the things that I was a little bit unsure about. I mean, this sort of, more or less looks fine. This screen, I'd seen something else. I think it must have been on Reddit. It was kind of like someone had done like a video of the camera working. But this part of it, this here looks just like the articulating screen from the GH6 and the GH7. So essentially you get two angles on the back where you can tilt it up. And it works with the viewfinder. So one of them you can tilt it up and then you can lift the screen out. The next one you tilt it up and it kind of locks in place and the screen doesn't quite come out. But you get quite a nice high field of view. So like you can hold the camera low and you can look down and it's sort of straight. It's not like off to the side like an old kind of DV cam. But on the video that I saw, it's kind of like it's kind of on an arm and it pulls down. So it goes more or less totally flat. Which is quite a nice design. It's not one, that we've kind of seen, certainly in the time of me using Lumix cameras, I've not seen a design like that on one of them, like where it actually properly pulls down and you've got the articulation. But yeah, it's like, something you see in sort of other camera systems, but not something I've seen in any Lumix cameras. But yeah, that sort of still stands to be seen. I mean, I assume they just port over the design from the GH6 and GH7. It's a good screen design. Like I think it's a good one. But yeah, I'll be interested to kind of see how that comes about. And then you can see on here as well, another, for me, real letdown. There's still only one USB-C port. Like they really could do with putting another USB-C port in for any cameras that support SSD recording. I've not seen anything about power over USB, but it's got to be like they don't really do cameras that don't have power over USB now. So if you've got an SSD running, you then can't use, like a power pack or a power bank or AC power over USB-C. And I've talked about this in like hundreds of videos. And it's a real, for me, a real pet peeve of the camera. If you don't want to use like a V-mount battery and you just want to use like a little power bank or something, it's super useful because it like pretty much quadruples the power of the battery, even with a tiny power bank. But you're really limited with what's kind of there with one port. And yeah, it's just a real we've got essentially a new camera design here, and they've still got one port in there, which is just so disappointing. And especially if in any way this new app requires you to plug the phone into the camera. Then you've either got the choice of powering the camera, using an SSD, or using this app tethered. So it's just kind of it's a real pain. It's one of those things where I just wish that they'd put a second port in there, or at least come up with something that alleviates that a little bit. That's a bit of a shame for me. You can see on here as well, we've got it's essentially the same port design as the kind of GH6, 7. You've got the CF Express Type B and one SD slot. So, it's a mismatch of cards, which again, it's a bit of a gripe for me, but I can kind of understand if you had two CF Express cards. This hasn't got the fan on the back of it like the GH6 and GH7. And to be honest, on a GH6, when I run it for a long time, I find that I really need that fan because these CF Express cards get hot. So having two in there, it would be probably a disaster waiting to happen. But it's it's one of those things where it's great having the CF Express cards, from the sense if you can shoot really chunky files onto them without needing an SSD. They're expensive, but I did a video about using NVMe ones, which are a lot cheaper. I'll link out to that, but for me, it's a good setup. I kind of like it, but at the same time, the mismatch is slightly annoying at the same time. And then you can see the top of it. Again, it's kind of the same as everything. One thing you kind of notice on this, got a C5, so an additional one too. There's not something I'm kind of familiar with, a C5 dial on a Lumix camera. It's not something I've had on any of the ones I've owned. It goes I got up to C4 on the GH6, which is what I'm using at the moment. But most of this is quite familiar. You've got your single shooting mode. You've got things like your high resolution mode, burst 1, burst 2. I don't know why I didn't do those in order. You've got things like time lapse and timer. So that's all familiar on that kind of dial. And then, you've got your standard modes on here: intelligent auto, program, aperture priority, shutter speed, manual, and then all your custom modes, like I say, up to 5, probably 5 then is programmable up to another however many. I think you could do, I think there's 10 on the GH6. There might actually even be 14. It's a lot. It's more than I use. I think I've got about, nearly 10, I think, programmed in on there. But, you get a ton of them, and then you can see the AF dials on kind of the back there. The strap design for it actually is a bit nicer than the GH6 and the GH7 body. I know this is more kind of akin to the actual S5 body, but it's got some sort of crossover from the others. And then you can see we've got the full kind of rundown here. So again, we've been through like most of this stuff really. It's got a lot of like the nice new features from the other cameras, the pre-capture, 8K 30. They're saying about this firmware update coming soon. So yeah, 6K ProRes RAW. Yeah, that's decent actually. Up to 6K. That's higher than I thought it might be. I thought 4.4 was a bit low, but 6 that's good. And then you can see on there the options it's got there. So HQ 422. And yeah, I mean, who knows if that's what the options are below that. Like I say, there's not like a full spec sheet of this, but if that's the max, then you should be getting like 4.4K, 4K, 3.3, and everything sort of below really. You can see on there you can record to an external SSD. It kind of stands to be seen, which will be interesting on this one. We're talking ProRes RAW, ProRes, and we're talking 8K. So, we're talking 4K for ProRes RAW. So it'll be interesting if the 2 terabyte limit stands for SSDs, because that is going to eat into that in a very short amount of time. Like, you'll probably want bigger drives than that, but the bigger they are, the less kind of reliable they get. So it is a bit tricky. The frame markers, you can see with custom as well. That's great. And it's just carried on from other cameras, so it's not a big surprise, but nice to have. 32-bit float audio. This is one for me that is interesting, because is that in camera or is that through the XLR2? It's very possible that it's in camera. It's not something I've seen before. Do you know what? I don't think I've ever seen 32-bit float in a camera I've ever used. I mean, there probably are ones out there. I mean, you can tell me in the comments if you know of any, but I don't know of any that have 32-bit float actually internally. I mean, I know the GH7 is kind of like internally, in quotes, it's kind of like it's internal, but you need the XLR2 adapter. But so it's kind of, you're essentially burning the audio into the video file that you're recording internally, but you're using an external recorder to get that 32-bit float file. So that's one thing that would be very interesting to find out. I mean, that's potentially like a bit of a game changer, and almost a slightly strange one, because they're kind of saying like you don't need the XLR adapter, you can just have 32-bit float with the 3.5. But then a lot of people that doing things professionally, they want XLR ports anyway, and a separate interface with like physical buttons and stuff. So it's I don't know, it's a difficult one. Again, this says it's got the multi-angle screen like the A9, but we're not seeing that in these pictures. I'm not seeing the pull down part of it, but to me, I mean, that again, to me, that's the GH6 GH7 screen. But yeah, I have seen other ones that kind of do it, but who knows what's true and what's not. The body size, a bit thicker than the S5 Mark II. Makes sense because it's got CF Express card slot. S5 and S5 Mark II don't. They're dual SD cards. Weather seal and ventilated. Yeah, red record button. Yeah. Tally in the front and the back of the camera. That doesn't sound that significant, but the S5 2 and 2X don't have tally lamps. That's at the moment just the GH kind of feature for like the newer cameras. Some of the older ones might have tally lamps, but like for the newer kind of cameras. And again, the price, and that's it really. I mean, I've been rambling on for a long time, so well done if you've made it to the end of this. But it was just kind of a look through what's there, and kind of a bit of an overview of it and just some thoughts on it really. But yeah, let me know in the comments like kind of what you think about some of these bits.